Okay, it is now 7 o'clock. Uh, Good evening. I want to say welcome and thank you to so many people for coming out this evening. This is, as if many of you had missed it earlier, this is the single largest Zoom event that the town has had to date, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedule that they have, and for this very important conversation, as well as for this opportunity, and it's greatly appreciated. I'm Matthew Sturgis. I am your town manager, and again, thank you for coming. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce our panelists that we have this evening. We have Chief Paul Fenton, who is our Chief of Police, who I will be passing the reins over to in the short order, as well as an additional guest in Cumberland County District Attorney, Jonathan Sahrbeck. And he's also a Cape Elizabeth resident, so thank you, Jonathan, for joining us. And finally, I'd like to thank Rachel Davis for bringing forward this program, or asking, or at least pulling this program all together through the library. If you heard one of the comments earlier from one of our attendees, the library has been really doing a fantastic job in pulling the community together and providing programming during this during the challenge of the pandemic. And this is an example of it, but it's providing us the opportunity to have a significantly important dialogue. Now, as we as a nation, state, and community attempt to recover, learn, and I hope change in response to the killing of George Floyd, the town and our police department have received some very thoughtful questions from community members. They're inquiring about our department's culture, the training, policies, and procedures of what makes up the Cape Elizabeth Police Department. In responding to the individual inquiries, the chief has done a great job having conversations with folks on a one-to-one basis. We felt that many residents may share the same or similar questions, and in response, we wanted to pull together tonight's conversation. So with that being said, I'd like to turn things over to Chief Fenton so he can respond to, I think, first lay out some of his, who his department is, what he believes in, what he stands for, and what they stand for, as well as respond to some of the questions that so many people were thoughtfully sending in before tonight's event. So I want to say thank you to you for that. And Chief, I'll turn the reins over to you, sir.
All right, thank you. What I'd like to do is start. Obviously, I want to thank Rachel for helping put this together. This was, something we've been working on for about a week, and Matthew, obviously, for giving this forum, and obviously Jonathan for his continued support. And he's always here as a great community member, but also someone else in the criminal justice system who can add another level of insight. Just to bring everyone up to date with how this came about from a police perspective. I watched these events unfold on television, and my first reaction was like most, the human side, where I was, it was a criminal tragedy. It was horrible. I tried to be honest with you, put it out of my mind and distance myself. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Having been a use of force instructor my entire career, I teach up at the police academy. Typically, I try to watch these events and kind of see where they came from, what caused this. This one was so painful to watch. I still have not watched the entire video. But over the weekend, I was kind of processing it, and that started with, I was actually going for a family bike ride, and my wife actually said to me before we go, she's like, you have something going on that you need to take care of before you can have family time. And so I reached out to Councilor Gabrielson and immediately started discussing with him, should I provide a statement? Do you want those, think this is an appropriate thing for the department to do? How should we be responding effectively to the community and the questions I'm sure they have? Even though these events took place across the country, it has reverberations here in Cape as well, and how should we best address that? And Jeremy and I started talking about Rachel and her success that she's had during these COVID times of doing these Zoom meetings. So I'd planned on getting in touch with Rachel that Tuesday. The Monday, I was actually out of the office teaching de-escalation and use of force to prospective officers up in Mechanic Falls. And throughout the day on Monday, I started to receive emails from concerned citizens of Cape Elizabeth requesting my policies and procedures, my training, a lot of records that we have, and I totally understood, and I was supportive of giving that information to people. Those started to flow in throughout the day on Monday. As soon as I get into the office on Tuesday, I decided not to email any of those people back. I decided to call them back. We're a small enough community where you should be able to have a conversation with your chief, and I should be able to answer your questions. Typically, I like to do it face-to-face. With COVID, I was reduced to just talking on the phone. But in those conversations, I started to get a dialogue with people and find out, I answered their questions, but I also told more about than our policies and our procedures. I talked about our hiring practices. I talked about our community policing, our culture. I talked about the individual officers that make up the great department that I'm proud to lead. These are very complex issues that can't be, covered with a statement, especially too, as I was listening to the community start, especially people at these protests. They said they were sick of statements, sick of just general statements. So that's where I came in the idea that we really needed to have this conversation, and it was a matter of putting that together. Later on in the week, I was asked to be part of a unity rally, which took place on Sunday, which was a great opportunity for members of the community to get together. And it was a great opportunity for me to do what I need to do at this point, which was listen. And I was a very moving experience. It was even more powerful than I anticipated it could be. And even that, it was a challenge for me as a chief. I've been the last 3 months doing the COVID separating of people, and here I am being asked to be part of such an important project, and we have the COVID issue going on, and that wasn't lost to me. So some discussions with the manager, we decided that we were going to let the event go on. We just made sure that we did it in the safest manner possible. We had a great social distancing. The police department was there handing out masks, but it was a challenge but I had to make a decision, and I thought that was an important thing, to have people have their voices heard. I think when I was thinking about it in my mind, I was thinking about a quote from Malcolm X that said, when people are sad, they do nothing. They just cry over their constitution. But when people are angry, they create change. And we had that anger, and we needed a voice, and people needed to be heard. And Jonathan was there. It was a great opportunity. And then the Zoom meeting was scheduled for tonight. So this is my opportunity to not listen anymore, but to provide answers. And people have a lot of questions. I've received them all week. I hope to be able to go through some of them. And I want to say as well, if I don't answer your questions tonight, you can come here any day. You can call me. I pride myself in the last 18 months as chief to be with not one thing that's accessible. So come in if you're not answered with any of these questions tonight, and I'll provide documentation or any questions people might have. And we're just hoping to, like I said, answer your questions tonight. And I'll go ahead and let Jonathan do his quick introduction, and we can start taking some questions.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, one of the big things that I've been hearing a lot from people with lived experience about racism in America and racism in Maine and in Cumberland County was that they're sick of statements, and it's time for action. And one of the things that has really kind of made me through this whole process, and after observing and seeing George Floyd's murder, it's one of those things that we really need to take steps as a community, as a country, so we're not standing here again if this goes on anymore. We really need to, as somebody like myself who's in the criminal justice system, I need to listen, I need to reflect, and then I need to take action along with other individuals to really make positive changes. And this isn't just between the chief, myself, and people who have experienced racism. This is at every level that we need to be talking about this as a community. This is education, housing, Department of Health and Human Services, healthcare. It's across the board on really addressing this if we're going to address it properly, because this isn't something that we're going to cure with a Band-Aid. This is really going to take a lot more than that. So those of us in the criminal justice system, we're here, we're listening, we're ready to take action, we're ready to work with the community. And we're here to answer your questions tonight. So looking forward to talking to you, looking forward to hearing what people say. But more importantly, I'm looking forward, and I know the chief and everybody is looking forward to working together. So we're not here, and we're not going to be here again in the future. We want to make this change, and we want to work together with everybody.
Chief, I know you had a number of questions that were earlier submitted. I don't know if you'd like to touch on a couple of those. Specifically, there have been questions regarding de-escalation training of the department, as well as if you could briefly touch on the training that the department does undertake on a routine basis, as well as what the department's approach is as far as sensitivity training, racial bias, things along, the common elements of many of the questions that were brought in earlier.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our department as a whole has a huge focus on training and education. As I don't know, most people are aware, we have 7 officers with master's degrees, 5 officers with bachelor's degrees, and another officer who's actually working on his his bachelor's degrees, hoping to go higher. But training is ongoing here, and it's a continual process. One thing that I did do when I took over as chief was I started a review of all the policies and procedures and training within the department. I put on a program we've purchased called Power DMS. It's a records management system. It allows us to work towards accreditation, which is making sure that our policies are consistent with the best standards throughout the country. It's a long undergoing 2-year process. I started it about 6 months ago. It includes training. It includes policy development. Those policies are living, breathing documents that we're always updating. I'd already actually just finished redoing our use of force policy before COVID and was getting ready to roll it out. And now I've done a revamp of it in light of what occurred this week or last week, and have done another rewrite of it. This Power DMS also allows us to have training. It's a huge element of this, but it allows me to put up, it not only when officers, let me back up, when officers when I put policies on it, officers can not only just sign off on them, but I can give them tests. So more important policies like use of force, you can actually give an exam, so you're making sure that the officers fully understand and comprehend all of the elements of that policy. It also allows me to track and make sure that we're reviewing them on a regular basis. In terms of training, it allows me to keep track of all the individual trainings that officers have attended away. But the real great addition that I enjoy and I've been working on is allowing to have shorter trainings for officers on any host of topics that we want, that include use of force, hate bias crimes, anything. As society changes and issues in society change, I can then put up articles that officers can read. They have to sign off on them. I can do short videos. Sometimes people learn very well in a 40-hour class. Sometimes it's good to get exposed with an 8-hour class, but then sometimes it's those half-hour videos, insightful article that I have that I can download. So those are some of the things we have now. Looking at doing a quick search in terms of some specific training that people were asking about. As a department, we are all CIT certified. We only have 2 officers who are not. One of them is Officer Tammy Shafran, who's our newest hire, and she was busy in the last year getting her academy training done in her EMT. But she'll be completing that training. She was actually scheduled for it and it was canceled. Part of that is de-escalation. We are all trained in verbal judo, which is another way of talking and interacting with the public. So these are all de-escalation techniques. In use of force, we obviously cover de-escalation as well. And also since 2016, a quick search I have here, all officers have had implicit human bias training, bias-based policing training, awareness of cultural diversity training, and policing cultural diverse communities training. And we continue to, and those trainings are brought out by the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. They have certain topics which we're mandated to attend every year. And then the department can layer in additional department-wide training as we see fit. I hope that's a good answer for you.
Chief, you said CIT. Do you mind just explaining what crisis intervention training is?
Sure. The bulk of the calls that we have, a lot of the calls that we have, especially the risky calls, is the crisis intervention training, which is for people who are undergoing mental health crisis. So it's a week-long training. It's very intensive, and it teaches officers the body language and the behaviors to de-escalate situations. Oftentimes when people are in crisis, they're ramped up, but that also is mirrored in a lot of interactions we have with the public, not necessarily in a mental health crisis, but just think about when you're calling the police department, it's probably the time in the life you've been most ramped up. So it really teaches officers about soft body language, soft language, how to deal effectively, the way you speak with somebody. It's a very intensive and a very important training. The state requests that most departments have at least 30% of their department trained. We have 90, and I hope to be at 100 soon. So.
And one thing I just want to add on that is Cape's at 90%. I know Portland and South Portland are both at 100% when it comes to CIT certified training for officers, which is a great number for Cumberland County. And I think that from speaking to people I know at NAMI, National Association for Mental Illness, they are ecstatic that Cumberland County has taken such a sort of approach that we have when it comes to making sure that most of the officers in our entire community are trained and CIT certified to do exactly what the chief just said, de-escalate situations, especially those involving mental health issues.
Now, I think we've done decent job of getting the subject introduced, but I know we do have a number of people involved who've tuned in this evening, and would like to open that up for conversation and questions if people would be so willing. We do have the raise your hand function, as you may notice, at the bottom of your screen. So we'll do that. And now what part of my role and job as facilitating the Zoom discussion is to allow folks to talk, and then when you're done, we'll move on to the next speaker. The other item I'd like to let everyone know is that this evening's discussion is being recorded and will be available through the town website. And I know it'll be also available through the TML website as well. So if you have friends who are unable to take part this evening, we do want to make it available for folks if they would like to see that there. So if there are questions, we'd be, I know both Chief and Jonathan, as well as myself, I'd be happy to take those at this time, or even comments for that matter. The only question or request is that there is not an unlimited amount of time, unfortunately, but we would hope that folks would keep respectful of other questioners as well who may want to take part as well. First question would be from Maureen Clancy, and Ms. Clancy, if you give me a moment, it takes me a second or two to expedite that. Whoops, you dropped off there. There we go.
Sorry.
Good. Nope, I got you now. You're good to go now, Ms. Clancy.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Sorry, I wasn't trying to raise my hand. I was trying to look up the questions that I had sent in before so that I could remember. So I was dragging my mouse, so I apologize. But one of the questions that I was, that I had sent in earlier was around school police officers, school resource officers. There's a lot of data out there that says police officers in school increase the involvement of students in the criminal justice system. And I know that there's a lot of places that are looking at this, Portland included. I work in the Portland school system. And so I'd like to see what we're thinking about that in Cape Elizabeth and what other models. I've always been curious why the community policing model that works so well in communities to build trust and uses civilian officers is not a model that we've used in schools.
Absolutely. So in terms of our school resource officer, so that is a new position. With I think this Dave just completed his second year in the schools. And I can sit here and tell you a bunch about it, but I think if you speak to our community, that's oftentimes the most important position I have right now. He has the opportunity to connect with all of Cape's youth and indirectly with the parents. And he's been a great addition to the department. It's something that is fully funded by the police department. It's not actually funded by the school department. But Dave sets an example of how things should be done. He's got a great mannerism with the kids. The kids really respect and look up to him. But I think when I have an illustrative conversation. So Aman Hagos, who's a student who graduated last year, a student of color, who I've had numerous meetings with this week. I've had numerous cell phone conversations. He's actually planning a march on the police department tomorrow, which I can speak more in detail about if people have questions about that march tomorrow. I spoke with him about that just yesterday. I said, Aman, as a student of color, recently graduated from Cape Elizabeth High School, what is your position on school resource officers? And he had some real concerns about them. He felt as though that they were not always the best interest of the students. And I said, how about Cape Elizabeth? And he said, it's probably your best position. He said his experience with the officer was absolutely fantastic. He thought he was a great representative of the department and that he interacted with the students well. He got students familiar with a police officer, comfortable around police officers. I even had some other questions from community members about why he wears a uniform. So I asked Aman, once again, what about wearing a uniform? And he said, no, he thinks it's important that Dave wears the uniform because that makes that connection, that lifelong connection for the youth of a positive interaction with an officer, and that Dave really represents the ideals that kids need. And in terms of the benefit from the school department, They could speak to it more directly, but if from what I've had with conversations, they say he's invaluable, that he is there as a great guide for students, but also he helps administration in terms of discipline. He's a third party for some of the interviews that need to be done at schools. And I've had nothing in my community negative said at any point from any student or teacher about our SRO's position. In my 18 months, not a single negative email. Hundreds of positive comments, but nothing negative at all. And that's just been our experience here. And I know different communities have different issues and they're policing different types of places, but for Cape Elizabeth, it's been a great fit. And like I think I said at my supervisor's meeting this week, he's been my most valuable resource because of his connections with the community. And that's the type of community we have in the community policing based policies that we have here at the department. That's the big push for me. So.
And one thing I just wanted to say on that as well, because we hear this argument a lot with our SROs and people being involved with the juvenile justice system, if there is an SRO. There's really tremendous studies out there with regards to the school to prison pipeline. And that is about SROs, but it's also more about discipline and how schools approach disciplinary action when it comes to kids, whether or not it's punishment or whether or not we should be looking at the harm that's being done. And there's a lot of different school systems around, especially really close to us in South Portland, that use the restorative justice function when it comes to punishment and discipline in the schools. So it's not about sending a kid home for a suspension. It's actually getting the kid to sit down and understand, because of that kid's actions, what harm did it cause? Who did it affect? How did it affect that person? How did it affect the school community? How did it affect his family or her family? And when they take this sort of holistic approach when it comes to what kind of discipline does the kid go through, they're seeing a lot better results than just simply doing suspensions and doing detentions and having that punitive aspect of what we do in the schools. And when you see the statistics, which are pretty alarming about kids with color being more involved with school discipline, it might be something that we as a community in Cape Elizabeth really might want to take a look at. And obviously you can't take everything that's happening in South Portland and transfer it over to Cape Elizabeth. But at the same time, why not really kind of explore this? Why not talk to people on the school board, talk to administrators and say, have we really kind of gleaned into this? Have we really sort of looked into this to see if this might be something that might work in our community? These are questions that we really need to start having with our community leaders.
And another thing Dave's done is he's just provided tons of opportunity for the police department to connect with the community in many different ways. He's even had the department over there doing school safety training for the staff at the schools, including first aid and a host of different issues. But Dave is, the kids are constantly asking for him to go to their project graduations, to go to the prom. You know, the kids, for me, they are constantly asking for his presence, probably sometimes where Dave is trying to balance his work and family life, because they do enjoy him and he's a trusted position. He's also the one the school turns to if there's a child in crisis or doesn't showing up for school. But at the same time, Dave is the one too who was handing out caps and gowns the other day to all the seniors who were graduating, which I got a ton of emails from citizens about. He's been bringing the meals from the schools to homes. He's been picking up the prescriptions for people and doing a lot of the outreach. Even though the schools have been out, Dave's been here 40 hours a week, using those connections and using those the position of trust within the schools to fill a host of functions for the schools and for the kids, which all just reinforces the positive influence that he has and the positive example he sets for policing and for our students and for our adults. The parents love him as well. So.
And one of the additional aspects of the position when it was created was about concerns about threat vulnerability in the schools. You know, fresh off the crisis, you know, the tragedies in Connecticut, as well as other school shootings that had taken place. That was in forefront in the council's concerns as well, and the position was funded. So, and it's grown from there. And so that's, I would agree with the chief. It seems to have been a very successful launch, and with no shortage of effort from Officer Galvin as well. So. Next question that we have would be from Tammy Walter. And Tammy, your mic is hot, so feel free to bring forward your question.
Well, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I've lived in Cape Elizabeth for over 25 years, and I've had quite a number of reasons to call the police department. And one time I had two men in the middle, I don't know, I came home one night and two men came into my driveway and I had to call the police. They were from out of town and they were high on drugs. And I can tell you quite a few other times when things have happened and the police have shown up very quickly, and they've always been, de-escalated things, helped me. And I guess I'm just here to say that feel extremely grateful that I live in this town with this police department in this state, but especially at the town of Cape Elizabeth. Every time I've ever called and anytime anything's ever happened, they have been professional and courteous. And even the very last time I called, I live across the street from Winnick Woods, and a dog jumped on me, and I had the license plate, and I said to the officer, like, go get him, because I was really upset. And they were like, well, they probably didn't know that, that they had to have their, dog under voice control. And I was like, yeah, that's right. They always seem to, think like the best, that like maybe the way I'm not thinking at the time when I'm upset. So that's all I'm here to say, is that I am very grateful for our police department.
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you for that, Tammy. The next speaker that we have would be Heidi Groff. Heidi, I'm going to make you unmuted here, I think. There you go. You're good. Your microphone's live.
Hear me?
Yes. Thank you for your patience.
Awesome. So I have to be completely honest. I kind of got on the call. I do have, I jotted down some questions, but I really joined the Zoom call to just get a feel of the status quo. And I am the mother of 3 children of color, although they are now young adults. And I've lived in Cape Elizabeth since 2003. And like Tammy, I've had many wonderful experiences with the Cape Elizabeth Police Force, including Chief Paul Fenton. And I would also like to mention Aaron Webster and Tammy Chaffron. So that being said, I guess what I want to say is I came on the call a little bit late, like 3 minutes late, but what the primary thing that I'm hearing right now from you, Chief Paul Fenton, and you, Jonathan Sahrbeck, is more a layout how the police department works, and not so much a response to what is going on in this country at this time, and how, as a police department, how you feel about that, and what you would do as the chief to combat these injustices. And I would also like to add to what, I'm sorry, I forgot, let me see, what Maureen had said about the school police resource officer. So my youngest child graduated 5 years ago. So at that time, I don't believe there was a resource officer available. But I do want to say that one of my experiences with the Cape Elizabeth Police was very bad. And that was with my oldest daughter, who is now 27. And she had been caught drinking. And it was criminalized, and she was given a summons. She had to go see, I don't even know what it is called, but some kind of a police officer in South Portland, right across the street from where the juvenile detention center is. And had I not been there with her, and had I not advocated for her, she was asked to sign forms that would have put her into the criminal justice system. So that is a huge concern for me. I don't know if that is still how things are handled in Cape Elizabeth when a child is caught doing drugs or drinking. As a mother, I found that my children, not only my children, other children, children's behavior was criminalized. And I don't agree with that. I feel children are children, children make mistakes, and they need to be supported and aided in this. So that's really what I wanted to say. And so, yeah, I guess I'm curious, Chief Fenton, what is the Cape Elizabeth Police Department doing to help with this crisis? There is a crisis at this point.
I absolutely agree. We are in crisis. And what I've done is I've had a series of conversations. I've just been doing what I'm doing tonight. I need to make sure that I've, although this incident didn't involve a member of this department, it impacts this department. I teach every officer in my department, and I tell them continually during our meetings, what we do is little acts every day that create a reservoir of trust. And we fill that one spoonful at a time. Each action we have is going to fill that reservoir. And you need to do that to have the trust of the community, because we need to have the trust of the community to even basically function. It's about transparency. It's about good deeds within the community. But one bad act can drain that reservoir. And at this point, officers who wear the same uniform as me have drained that reservoir for our officers across the country. And now our job is to regain that trust. And that starts with listening, it starts with reviewing our policies. I'm actually re-reviewing our use of force policy. I'm re-looking at different ways. And in the weeks to come too, there's going to be some criminal justice reform. I hope this is an opportunity to hear people, listen to people, and start looking at the changes I need to make. I've looked at some already. Right now, emotions are high. There's a lot going on, but we're looking to make change. We're starting the conversations. Today I was reviewing our use of force, the numbers of use of force we've had in the last 6 years, coming over those. I'm talking to people about body cameras. I'm talking about a host of different changes that we can make. And tonight's an opportunity to start the conversation with the community of what they feel I need to do. I am the community. I work for the community. The decisions I make is based on the input of this community. I want people, in the instance you gave, I don't want to go into details about the interactions with the audience. I want people who have that type of interaction, come talk to me, come see me. We're a small community. I have an open door policy. Come to me anytime. Tonight we're limited in time, but in my job here, I am not limited in time. You will find me here every night till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. My door is always open. I'm always willing to talk. And I hope to continue the conversation. And look, I'm sure the Maine Chiefs of Police, I'm sure the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, the Board of Trustees is going to come down with policy changes, revamps. We're already looking at ways we do things. But at my core, what I'm trying to do right now, to be honest with you, is regain the trust of the community. And we need to do that. I've had a lot of conversations, sidebar conversations. I've had a ton of conversations with numerous individuals. And for the most part, I've been very happy to hear that most people have had a very positive interaction with our department. But can we improve? Absolutely. For example, Aman's doing a march tomorrow on the police department. And I talked to Aman numerous times about this plan tomorrow. It's kind of a symbolic march on the police tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I support people's right to do that. I want to hear them. And I wanted to make sure too, when talking to Aman, what is this that you're marching on us? Is there something you feel that the department can improve upon? And Aman literally said to me, you are the gold standard of policing. Your police department I've had nothing but great interactions with your police department. He adores Officer Galvin. I know him personally from seeing him at the gym. He said tomorrow night's more of a symbolic move. But at the same time, these are the conversations I need to have. We've had discussions about larger criminal justice implications and changes that need to be done on more of a national level. And I support that, but I'm also continually, as I sit here today, overlooking all of our policies, procedures, and training and shifting to respond to the community's needs. And tonight, I just want to hear what those needs are. I know I need to regain the trust. You just got to tell me how. What do you need from me?
And one thing I just want to add on that too is one of the things that people just need to be able to say and willing to say and want to say is Black Lives Matter. It's a key thing that we really need to take a step, and not just our community, but our country, to understand that we have to stand up against police brutality. We have to stand up against systemic racism, and we need to have these conversations and then have these conversations and then take action. I can't say that enough, because words are words, but acts and actions are much more valuable and can have a much more long-lasting effect. And when you hear people in positions, whether it's your representative or your state senator, your town council, your school board, when you hear people say that, your district attorney, your police chief, those are the people that really need to be saying these things out loud and really making people have these conversations, not just with each other, but with their families, with their friends. Really have people take a big, wider view of this in order for us to make any type of change. Because if we don't, we're unfortunately going to be in the same situation. And unfortunately, as we saw in Minneapolis, we lose a life, and that's unacceptable.
And it's the changes that I want to make that people can see. I can make policy changes, but no one sees our change in policy. So it's a combination. I know I have to reaffirm the trust of the community here. We've lost a lot. But I want to also at the same time, I constantly have to feel like, reiterate that I do believe we have a great department, but a lot of the issues that you're seeing across the country, I believe that we're not experiencing here. Can we get better? Absolutely. I'm always looking for ways to get better. But I need the input from the community, and then I need to make those changes, especially the changes the community can see. And being part of the rally the other night, I think showed where I was coming from, that I was here to listen. Being involved in tomorrow night's event and being involved in tonight's event. I'm leaning into this. I need to hear from the community, and that's what I need at this point. Email me, call me, come in.
The next participant would be Phoebe Shields. Ms. Shields, your microphone is now live.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm super excited that, Jonathan, that you mentioned restorative justice. I know a few people on the board and through my studies in social work, and it's a very exciting and new thing to be looking at, to reinvent the conversation between perpetrators and victims. So I'm really excited that you said that. One thing to get to in terms of, telling you what we need, what we want to see, a lot of these things unfortunately aren't measurable, but we can see how deeply racism has impacted us all, and how ingrained it is in society systemically, excuse me. So I would really like to see something, because we see racism, we see it in healthcare. It's not just police brutality. We see it in healthcare. We see it in schools, everywhere. I would like to learn more about what other towns are doing. When you look at Kennebunk, they're doing harm reduction. They're doing things around substance use that no longer align with the abstinence model, and it's evidence-based. And I think that's really important, that we are looking to other places and seeing what they're doing. Saco is a huge presence in their town in terms of National Night Out, Police Explorers. So I guess my question is, how closely are you monitoring our neighbors' police departments and seeing how they grow and their progress, especially in terms of when Kennebunk's doing restorative justice and harm reduction in a way that is available to not only police officers, but to the community?
Thank you, Ms.
Absolutely.
Shields.
Yeah, I'm always looking for new programs to get involved. There was actually a restorative justice program that was getting started. I think Jonathan could speak to a little bit more through the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office. There was someone who was at a Maine Chiefs meeting, and I actually signed up to get more involved in that and to learn more about that program. And of course, like many things, COVID hit and put an end to that, much as it did a very large, speaking of which too, we go back to training. There was a implicit bias training that Janine Roberts had hosted that was supposed to take place last Wednesday that I had offered up to the entire department, and they were planning on going to. So the COVID has canceled some things, but part of my job is to be in constant communication with my partners. The departments that kind of reflect our communities and our style of policing are Falmouth, Cumberland, Yarmouth, and those chiefs and I have lunch once a month. And we just talk about issues facing our communities and what we're doing to combat some of the issues that we're seeing. We have very similar styles of policing, so we're always bouncing ideas off one another. It's a continual thing in terms of policy programs that we're looking at. You know, that's what we need to do as a department, is constantly look for better ways. There's always a better way. And that's what I'm trying to do at this point with this department. I've really connected with the community on many levels. Has been a huge focus of the last year. Anyone who's been watching can tell that's been the main focus. We have a very good department. I took over 18 months ago. Why I want to get involved in the community is once I'm connected, then you can tell me what you want, what you need. It's accessibility. You know, me going into the schools has given me so many opportunities to hear the opinions and develop relationship with community members, school staff that have then developed into more programs and got us into doing more things. So we're in the library. I think Rachel can speak to that. We're reaching out to all of our community partners within Cape Elizabeth, but also with our outside advocates. We're involved with NAMI of Maine. We're involved with everybody else. I'm always open and looking for new and progressive ways to run this department. That's what I do as a job. I often say that I'm looking on the horizon. The guys here are taking care of the day-to-day, but part of my job is to look on the horizon and see what obstacles are coming our way and what innovative ways I can do my job to best serve this community. But at the end of the day, I need the trust of the community, and I feel like that's lost a little bit. I need to regain that, and then I need to hear what programs people want, what people need, and then I can try to fill those needs.
Jonathan, any thoughts?
Yeah, what the chief was talking about was Ryan Anderson from the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine came to the Cumberland County Chiefs meeting. I think maybe it was September, I think September, October. But she basically offered up what the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine could offer police departments when it comes to trying to resolve conflict on a level that diverts people from the criminal justice system. Sort of like a situation where you could have mediation between parties. Because we all know once something goes in the criminal justice system, people sort of dig in their heels, they're ready for a conflict, it's an adversarial system. So if we could avoid that with actually having communication between individuals to try to, like I said, understand the harm, reduce it, and hopefully you will get much more satisfaction on both sides that they feel like they've been listened to and heard, and then come up with a resolution that's beneficial for everybody. It's much more beneficial. It's much more beneficial for less calls of service and much more beneficial for the individuals involved. And like the chief said, unfortunately with COVID-19, it's a lot of things have taken a back seat. But there's a lot of things that Cumberland County is doing when it comes to these innovative things with prevention work. I know that one of the big things that I was discussing before COVID, when I was trying to get as many ears as I could, was adverse childhood experiences and making people understand how trauma can really affect what happens down the road with individuals. And the more and more I hear people talk with lived experiences when it comes to racism, the more I can understand about how the trauma that a lot of people of color go through when they're younger really can have a very negative effect going forward into their lives. And so that's something that right there, we know that experienced racism is one adverse childhood experience, not to mention many others that a lot of people face in the community if that's unfortunately, if they're in the situation that they are. So having these conversations, really delving into what really matters and what really can be impactful, then can really make a difference in the long run is conversations that we really continually need to have. And that's interesting what you said, Phoebe, about Kennebunk, because Chief Bob McKenzie down in Kennebunk is a great advocate when it comes to people in recovery and talking about prevention. And so I'm going to reach out to him and learn a little bit more about the harm reduction stuff that he's doing down there.
And one of the reasons I was so excited about the program is it's something we do on a not a formal role, but we do have a utility officer and Darren Estes, who's kind of our community liaison officer. And he often does things of mediating of neighborhood disputes, things that, like you said, we can keep out of the criminal justice system. That's the other thing Officer Galvin does, is he does a lot of that on a school level, but also things that might be school kind of connected, but need to be taken care of that occur off campus or at home. I'm oftentimes bringing him in. So I with those positions, I have the resources with those positions to apply them to these different programs. And I'm always looking for those new programs. For example, during COVID, Darren Estes immediately switched to calling every single senior in town and finding out if they had any need at all. There was hundreds of people that he called and made contacts, picking up prescriptions, delivering food. So I have those resources that are kind of there, and depending what my community needs, I can direct them there. And Dave's been doing it on a school level. Darren's been doing it on a more of a community level. But I have the resources, and it's just a matter of, like I said, knowing the need, filling the need.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, DA Sahrbeck. Next questioner will be Nicole Boucher. And Nicole, if you would allow me a moment just to get you unmuted. And there you go. You should be live now. Thank you for coming.
Hey, everyone. Thank you. So I've heard a lot of comments tonight about like it being the model community, and we have a great force, which, you know, I've had limited interactions with, but, you know, coming from that standpoint of being a very privileged community where our police force looks exactly like the people that we're serving, like, what is the commitment to hiring diverse staff? I know we just added a female police officer. Are there plans to bring in a Black person or a person of color? I mean, we are very close to Portland, and you know, I see our community growing with a lot of out-of-state people. I'm not originally from Maine myself, and so as we get more diverse, we're going to need to have those diverse people at the table. And the other part of this is like where we're saying we look to communities like Falmouth and Cumberland and Yarmouth. We're getting ideas from people that are the same as us. So I'd love to branch that out a little bit, go to places like Saco and Biddeford. Maybe they have different problems than what we have in Cape, but we can still learn from them and prepare for them and maybe take their approaches in different ways. So I just want to encourage thinking outside the box and outside of the communities that model the community we have. And then for a more actionable standpoint, I'd love to see more metrics. Just, you know, I went to the police department website while all of this was happening, and there's links to an intruder drawing from 2005. I did not even live in Maine there then. And so I'd love to just see, like, how many calls are we getting? How many incidents do we have where there's like complaints about an officer? You know, how much of your time is spent on neighbor disputes versus actually like enforcing laws and things like that, just to see like where is our time spent, because maybe there's an opportunity to rejig what the roles are and like what the different like there's probably a way that instead of having an officer do some of these activities, there's a different role, like we have a mental health expert on the team or something like that. So I just love some metrics and data, and that's how I understand and process things myself.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there. Let me kind of go in order, and if I lose one, Matt, you hopefully will keep track for me. As far as our staff and if they're reflective of the community, yeah, my first hire as chief was Officer Tammy Shafrain. She's the first female officer we've had here since I've been here. And she's a great addition, and she's a qualified applicant, and she just happens to be female. We also have Officer Wagner, who is an Asian American. We also have Officer Galvin, who's a Mexican American. So we have some diversity within our ranks. My concern going forward is recruitment and retention is recruitment of officers. We need, right now with things going on, not a lot of people are going to have trust in the police. And then a byproduct of that is not a lot of people are going to seek out police work as a profession just because of the mistrust, especially in these communities, the communities of color. The likelihood that they're going to want to come in to get into police work is just lessened just by the viewpoint of the job. I mean, just teaching Monday to some prospective officers, a few of them in the class were questioning whether or not they wanted to do this. They'd signed up wholeheartedly. I was to the point where I was teaching defensive tactics, and in some sidebar conversations, they said, I don't know if this is right for me. I don't know if I want to do this. They're watching social media. They're watching the media. They're having some doubts. And for me, I worry about the impact on my current staff, but I also worry about the impact on my future staff. When I first applied for a job here, I think there was 70 applicants. The last opening where we got Officer Tammy Shafran, there was 7. 7 people applied for a job. We were so fortunate to get her. She's an absolute gem. You know, my first hire as chief, and I was lucky enough to say I nailed it because she's been nothing but wonderful. In terms of connections, I often refer to that group that I meet with, but I am also very close with Officer Sheehan from the South Poland Police Department. We have a lot of regionalized services with them. I'm very involved with the Scarborough Police Department. We share a harbor master, as well as a tactical team that we're constantly working with them. Frank Clark and I came up through the ranks together. He made chief in Portland. I was in conversations with him earlier today. So I do speak in some smaller groups, but I also have a larger group of officers that I meet with, Westbrook Police Department as well. And those are relationships that were built over 23 years of policing in Cumberland County. So I'm oftentimes looking for them. And they are part of groups of Maine chiefs and districts that we all get together and constantly are trying to find ways of doing things better. And we're doing that. In terms of Matrix and our website, I apologize. It's been a year and a half. The first year I was kind of getting my feet underneath me and trying to do those community connections. I would like to revamp our website. Matt can attest, I've been talking about that for a bit. It's been, but the priority is fixing it internally, getting everything I want running the way I want, and to lay those metrics out. I can tell you in terms of, I know people probably want to hear this as well, in terms of calls for service, we roughly have about 10,000 calls for service. And going back to 2017, in terms of use of force. So out of those 10,000 interactions on average year, in 2017, we had 2 uses of force. In 2018, we had no uses of force. In 2019, I took over as chief and I recrafted our policy of reporting uses of force to include those that occurred as we're all EMTs. Anytime you basically put hands on somebody, you do a report. Prior to that, the wording of the model policy, which we were using from the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, did not require a use of force report on every incident, every arrest. And it was only, it was very crafted very specifically. I opened ours up to basically anytime you put your hands on someone or point a weapon at somebody, you are to do a use of force report. So we had a spike in 2019 to 5 uses of force. 2 of those were on OUIs with non-compliant people. One was a medical call where someone was lacking insulin and was combative. And another one was an overdose where someone was brought back to life and was combative after being brought back to life after an overdose. And in 2004, thus far this year, we've had 4 uses of force, out of 10,000 on average, 4 uses of force. And they involved mental health calls and suicidal subjects on all of them. So, and of those, there's been no allegations of anybody in there of an excessive use of force. There's been no officer complaint since I've been here for 18 months. Not a single person has come in to file a complaint at all. I have had one individual come in to speak with me briefly about what he felt was a negative interaction with an officer who was conducting a traffic stop with his daughter. He didn't like the way the officer told him to get back in his vehicle until he was done with the daughter. That subject and I had a great talk about being a parent and balancing those needs in the officer. So once again, it's perspective and lenses. I was able to offer that. But so when I say that we're great and just the stats are there to support that. If people have questions about any of these things, once again, I can share all of these. I hope to be able to share and update our external website to provide more information for people. That is something on my project list, but as Matt can attest to, I've been prioritizing things, and I've put in a lot of hours this last year, and that is on my list. So I apologize. And people need to see what we're doing. I started the social media campaign. We never had one of those. I think that's been a great opportunity for people to view the department. Before, I felt like we were in the community, but we were separate. And I'm trying every opportunity I can to make us part of the community. And some of it is that Facebook page, the Instagram, so you can see the officers. What are we doing? Where are we? Providing information in terms of things that are going on in the community. It's content people want to consume. That's what I'm trying to find. What is it? But I need to hear from people of what type of content you need to consume so I can provide that. And that's my answers to those questions.
Thank you, Chief. Next we have Gina Tapp. Gina, if you allow me a moment, just to unmute you and we'll get you. There you go. Oops. You should be able to speak now. Thank you for coming in.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I hopped onto this meeting a little late because I was, I'm the director of HR for the city of Portland, and I was on the HHS Public Safety Committee meeting tonight where Frank Clark was going over his police policies. I just wanted to say that we're parents of an African girl here in Cape Elizabeth. We've been here about a year, And we really, really appreciate having the school resource officer in the high school, because we're trying to teach our daughter that the police are people that can be trusted. And it's just a wonderful example. I also realize that Cape Elizabeth is a very privileged community, and that I need to teach her about all of what's happening. So we're explaining to her, she's from Africa, so we're explaining to her about all the protests, not just in Portland, but around the country, and trying to explain in a way that she'll understand about the systemic racism and how we all are trying to do better and fight against that. And I just think it's really important that you did this tonight, and that you're coming out and saying we need to do better. And just want you to know I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tapp. Next, we have Sarah Crawford. Sarah, it'll take me a moment to unmute you, and you should be good to go here shortly. Oh, come on, computer. There, your microphone should be live now, Sarah. Thank you for your patience.
Sorry about that. I stepped away for one split second. Caught red-handed.
That's okay. Thank you.
So, I am in a position right now of feeling very white, in a very white state, and feeling very uneducated, and feeling like where I need to start is educating myself. And so I've been reading, and I really would love to see Cape Elizabeth, with the police force that we currently have, take a lead, take a step up, and lead Maine in showing what the future looks like. And I feel like we have a lot of really intelligent people here. We have a lot of doctors and therapists, and we have an incredible town filled with incredible people. And I really feel like we should be leading the way. Yes, we don't have a big Black, Indigenous people of color population, but we do have a population of them. And I think we need to start really standing up and changing policies and changing the way we think. And I was, saddened to hear Heidi's comments, but I think they were important for us to hear that, yes, this does happen here. And I guess I want to see policy change. Like, this conversation has been great, but it just still seems like we're just still talking. I want to see policy change, and I want to understand how that policy change happens. Chief Fenton, I've heard you say a number of times you're working on it and reworking on it, and I think that's great. I wonder if it needs to get broader than just you, if the town needs to be involved, but I want to see policy change, and I also want to understand, I guess my biggest question, and all of the questions that I've had that have kind of risen to the top of my mind, and I've shot Matt's way, is it seems to me like the fraternal order is really our weakness. So, I keep trying to think, how are things going to change? Because when you go into a situation, and there are not many, like you just noted with your numbers, they're not many. But when you need to know that your brothers and sisters standing behind you have your back, how do you know that when you potentially have to report an incident? Because that's what we're seeing over and over and over in this country. Officers looking the other way. And I would love to understand, to me, the only thing I can come up with in my naive way is body cams. Because I just don't see another officer, if you're in Providence or Boston, necessarily standing up and reporting another officer, even though they know it's the right thing to do, because that officer is going to potentially have his back in the next bad situation. So that's kind of where my mind is, and I'd love to hear, what your thoughts are. And I appreciate everything that everyone is doing. So thank you.
I appreciate those comments, and there's a lot to unpack there. I think what we're starting with too is, as I tend to look at every use of force that you see on television and try to figure out where did that come from. And I've seen a bunch of different things here, and I've seen training, a lack of training. I've seen officers who are using excessive force due to a sense of panic. I've seen compassion fatigue. That's always a worry with officers as we're exposed to different things over the course of your career. They have an impact on officers. I'm worried about officers' mental health. We deal with suicides. We see a lot of things. We do a lot of things in this job. And even in Cape Elizabeth, you know, I've unfortunately experienced and been part of some horrific things. We see a lot of death. We've seen a lot of death this week. We've seen unattended deaths. We've, you know, in the last few months, we've seen a very terrible suicide of a young man in town. So officers are exposed to a lot of things. And part of what I've done, and even just switching my schedule, I'm here for 2 shifts. I have my finger on the pulse of every officer. I want to be here for a significant part of each shift to kind of oversee my officers, see how they're doing, seeing where they're at. I think that's a part of it. I think what we don't have here that you're going to see in some other communities, especially inner city communities, is the us versus them mentality. But that goes back to my connections of community. And it sounds like I'm just ranting, but this is what reduces our use of force. Our officers are part of this community. There's no us versus them mentality here. But it all starts, like I said, with the hiring process, the people that we get, the people that walk through the door. I can't untrain brutality. I can't untrain racism. I can't policy away brutality. I can guide people. But I gotta have to start with the right person who walked through these doors. I have to effectively evaluate. I'm worried in the future that I'm gonna have to dip my standards because there just isn't the bodies. There aren't the people there. That's a huge fear for me going forward. Officers across the country resigning. No one here is near there. My officers are still well maintained, but you are seeing officers as well, good officers who are resigning across the country. Is there a thin blue line of silence in the Cape Elizabeth Police Department? I can truly tell you there is not. Officers here are high, that hold themselves to a high moral standard. We're in a community where you can get to know each officer. And I invite someone, if you have questions in the community, you want to come ride along and spend a night and get to know an officer, I would love that. Come in, there's a waiver, you jump in, spend a couple hours, get to know a person. And that's what's going to make us feel comfortable. That's where the trust, everything starts with trust. And I need to find those opportunities for trust within community. And then you'll see this isn't the type of guy who's going to cover something up. And we do have things that we're constantly looking and reworking policy. But I need to know what policies need to be reworked. I sometimes feel like the overall system is broken, but we're not broken. So I feel like I should be fixing something, but I'm trying to figure out what to fix. And it sounds like I'm putting something off, and I'm just being honest. I think we're doing things very well here. Even in the meetings on this weekend, the Unity Rally, I've been speaking with people of color. I'm asking them, what can we do differently? And I go back to Aman in my meeting with him. He's like, you guys are great. You guys are perfect. I grew up in this community, but he's like, I hate the system. I'm marching on your department on tomorrow night, but it's not you. I'm not marching on you. I'm marching on the system. You represent a system. And we had a 2-hour conversation that was very insightful. And him telling me about what he hates about the system, what the challenges are with the criminal justice system, access to legal defenses and things that are eroding, educational systems and all those things. He's marching for that on our system, but I don't want to seem like I'm deflecting, but I am looking to do things better, always seizing opportunities to do things better.
Chief, just for everyone who is attending right now, I just want to let you know, just a quick time check. We were originally intending to go until 8 o'clock. We've obviously gone past that time period. If everyone's comfortable going until 8:30, just let me know if you're okay with that.
I'll stay here till 10. I'm good for
Okay.
whenever. I'll stay till whenever. And I'll be in the office tonight. If someone wants to drive in and come see me, I'll be here doing some paperwork.
We may
Another
see our
thing
numbers drop at closer to 10, Chief.
And I know there's a lot of people out there, and she touched upon it, and I just want to talk real quickly about body cameras. That's been something that's been brought up. I've brought up a few times as chief. It's something I've looked at. Sometimes it's a cost versus need thing. There is a significant upfront cost for those, and I have no way putting enough. My officers have asked for them. They feel it's a layer of protection for them as well. So I'm open to that. The manager and I discussed it briefly tonight. I had a meeting earlier this week. We do have in-car cameras that have a microphone on them that officers do wear that records the majority of our interactions, even if we, traffic stops and a lot of the contacts with the public are videotaped through the in-car camera system, as well as the recordings on the officer's uniform. This week, we're looking to update those, and I actually, for the first time, started to get some price points for a body cameras system to come into the department. There's a significant cost. I was trying to trim down my budget just recently, and that is with COVID-related stuff. But if the community wants body cameras and we can find the funding, let me say unequivocally right now, I am 100% on board. I'm for them. The money though, I will say in terms of, there are some challenges, the ACLU, I was reading an article just prior to this meeting, some privacy issues that they believe they have. I'm sure Jonathan can speak a little bit to the FOIA request and what's, sometimes we're taking videos of people at their worst. There is some challenges with data management. There's some costs there in terms of servers we'd have to be able to procure. So, you're probably looking over $100,000 upstart cost in today's budget at a minimum to get that program started, but it's something I'm open for. Maybe Jonathan could speak a little bit some of the challenges that people have had across the country. They are not universally beloved. They came out as a very popular way for police oversight. There has been some challenges. And once again, anything that I can do to increase trust and transparency, I'm on board. Give me whatever it is. Body cams included. I think my first budget, it was brought up by one of the counselors, and I said, if that's something we want, we can continue the conversation. I haven't heard that from the council. I haven't heard that from the population until this incident. I haven't seen a big call for it. Once again, you're trying at those times to record those incidents that are questionable uses of force. And I'll remind everybody that going back to, we've had 10, 11 in the last 4 years. I went back to 2011, there was numerous years we had 0, 0, 0. So we're gonna spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to capture 11 moments that none of them alleged that there was officer misconduct. But what other program could we get for $100,000? But if people want the body cams, that's what I want to provide. Jonathan, I don't know if you have any comments on those.
Yeah, so body cameras, personally, I'm a fan of them because one, they capture an interaction. And as we all know, just in our personal lives and our professional lives, is that two reasonable people can have a different perception about what might have happened. A video camera, a body camera, really kind of takes that out of the equation. We know what happened and we know the entirety of the incident when people are involved. So there's protections for everybody involved, the police officer, the citizen that the police officer has an interaction with. But Chief Fenton's right. They require a lot of gigabyte storage, maintenance equipment. But at the same time, if it's protections, then it's a conversation that citizens need to have with the people in charge of their town. In Cape, it would be the town council, it would be the, sorry, Matt, but it would be the town manager that you would have to talk about this cost. But what is the price? What is it worth? For protection, yeah, maybe it is something that people really need to have that conversation. South Portland was the first community, I think in Maine, that actually implemented a full-time body camera system, and now it's Chief Sheehan, but at the time it was Chief Ed Guggens, and he told me that the first year that they have it implemented, they had 0 use of force complaints against their officers, because when people came in and said, Chief, I want to talk to you about this incident that happened, they said, okay, let's go and review the video, and they all reviewed the video, and there wasn't a single person that said, okay, I'm going to go forward with this complaint. And it's not because that person was in there maliciously and trying to get an officer in trouble for something that didn't happen. They just might have believed it or conceived it differently than what actually happened and what was shown on the video. So there's some value to it. The arguments against it have recently kind of come about more from a privacy standpoint and what that captures and what happens with the video. There was arguments that were made in Portland with regards to if those body cams would be used in the school system. And then if they were used in the school system, what happens to that? I don't think it was resolved completely, but there was some memorandum of understanding about how that video footage, if it was turned on, would very rarely be used. And speaking to the SRO over in South Portland at South Portland High School, he indicated that I think he had turned on his body camera twice in 2 years in a school setting, and one involved the parent. Parent who had showed up to school and was very upset, and the officer made the judgment call to turn on his body cam to make sure that he recorded that encounter. And so there are arguments on both sides, but from a prosecutor's perspective, I think that they can be a very valuable tool and a very valuable source of information for people to have on both sides. Because like I said, it protects the officers, but it also protects the citizens who have encounters with officers.
Yeah. And once again, part of my job I'm tasked with as police chief is to balance those wants versus needs and budgetary constraints that we have here, and how can I apply money to best fit. There hasn't been a big need or a big ask. It might exist now. Maybe that's one of those changes that we need to make. If that's what people want, then that's what I'll provide. Absolutely. And it's definitely not any issue with me as my philosophy of policing. Even my officers on numerous occasions have asked for it. And I even started, as I said earlier this week, started the conversation thinking it might go that way. I will tell you that the salesperson who was selling me in-car cameras did not want to any longer talk about in-car cameras. He wanted to talk about body cameras because the price point is so much higher than the in-car cameras. So, but if that's what the community out of this is, this one of the things we can do to rebuild that trust and transparency, then I'll absolutely willing to look at that and implement that. It's just a matter of finding the funding.
Next question or comment will come from John Bolts. John, I think you are now live, sir. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. So two things, one of which has to do with talking about your review of policies. And just to give you a little bit of perspective on trust, I hopefully will help you as you do that. I think the trust problem is not only in the individual police, right now, but it's also with police institutions. You see places like New York, Philadelphia, Buffalo, where you're seeing police organizations and top police stand up for officers that everyone's seen on video doing things that are just unexplainable. And so this lack of trust in the nation now in police institutions comes into play when you're reviewing your policies. So when you look to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, that's somewhat problematic because they're still within that police universe. I really think you need to be looking for partners that are beyond the just police institution to look to review and analyze your policies. And what you've been doing on the policy review, it sounds like it's a lot of work, but it's invisible because you've made it invisible. You have the ability to report on that. We don't know it. We don't understand it. We can help you do that, but you have to say, I review these policies. These are the standards I looked at. These are the standards I considered. This is how I did it. This is my report card I'm doing for myself on these policies. We can't do that. You can do that. And I'm saying you will need to do that in an environment to build trust that looks to institutions that have broad community buy-in, not just police institution buy-in.
I totally understand, and I appreciate your comments. I can actually tell you this week of a time that I looked at a policy, and one of them was about an officer having relations with a victim of a crime. And the model policy that I received suggested it was 60 days from the time of the end of the case going forth that it was okay for an officer to have it. And I reached out to our DV advocate through these doors and had numerous conversations with her. I contacted different police departments and asked about what their policy was. So I am looking at these things not just in a vacuum of policing. I am reaching out to community partners. I'm so lucky at this job to have great community partners from NAMI of Maine and our other mental health advocates, from SARS, from domestic violence advocates, and I'm constantly looking at them. I'm not just crafting these policies in a vacuum here. I'm looking to get the input of the community. This is an ongoing process. What I have to do at this point, though, we're looking at accreditation standards, which South Portland has an accreditation. Portland has it. They're CALIA standards. We're looking for one through the Maine Chiefs of Police, where they're going to be able to review those, and this is going to have us formalize our policy crafting. I mean, policies are the framework in which we perform our duties to make sure that we're performing ethically, consistently throughout our actions as a police department. They are an important part of crafting it. But at the same time, a lot of these issues that you're seeing across the country, a policy wasn't going to stop what happened in Minnesota. Policy couldn't stop that. Those are human beings. Those big issues that we're facing, the things of conscience, that's character. There's much deeper issues. Policies are important in terms of these incidents that we're seeing, but the things that we're losing our trust over go further than policy. That's character of these officers. I'm so proud to lead this group of people here at the station. It kills me to see these things, to think that anyone in society, based on what these other officers have done to bring down the reputation of all of us, And that's why I feel like I'm deflecting sometime when you're asking for problems here. It would be a disservice to reflect anything other than I think we have the best people. If you want a model policy of how to police, we have a great force. It's not me. It's made up of the people that are here. I was fortunate. I hired one and I inherited 12. And I hope to get more that are just like them. If I could cookie cutter them, I would. But at the end of the day, we're not robots. We're trained, we have policies, but at the core of us, we are human beings who have to know right from wrong, who have to treat people efficiently, effectively, who have to have compassion, who can't be burnt out. And I need them trained so they don't panic. That's important. But at the end of it, we get so caught up in all of these rules. I mean, that's a crime, which you saw on television. There's laws. He's going to go to prison. That didn't stop it. It's deeper than this. So I feel like the most important part, there's a policy doesn't keep me, has never kept me in my 23 years. It reminds me of how to do things effectively, consistently, professionally, legally, ethically. But the ethically part, that's me. That's my parents. They gave me that. And I craft that through the culture in which I run this department. My expectations I put on them. It's the interactions with the community that the reminder of these people are good people. I'm dealing with good people. Even prior to my taking over, I saw that we weren't connected with the community enough. So it wasn't an us versus them, but all of our interactions for the most part were enforcement actions, traffic, talking to people, keep your dog on a leash, your dog's barking, your neighbor says you cut down their tree. I want the interactions of my officers with the community to be social. I want coffee with a cop. I want to be reading to kids in the schools. I want them to know us. That's not selfish in the terms of that's the reflection of my department of the community. That's for my officers. I need them to like this community, and they do. I need them to appreciate this community. It's funny when most officers get hired, I remember when I was a sergeant for years, I had the same office, and all the new officers would come in the office, especially those who came from other departments. We have a couple guys from Farmington, Tammy came from New York. Without question, they all asked the same question. Chief, or backed up when I was sergeant, why is everybody waving at me? I'm like, they like us. Well, they just wave? I'm like, yeah. They're like, but just random people are waving at me. Do they think I'm somebody else? Especially Wagner. He said, I'm Asian. You don't have any other Asian guys. They can't confuse me. So why is everybody waving at me? And I said, because we have a good relationship with the community. That's what keeps these incidents from happening. There's no us versus them mentality here. There's no group. We don't feel like we're an occupying force in Cape Elizabeth. In some departments, that happens, and that's sad, and that's their problems to solve. I'm trying to do the best with what I have. I'm very fortunate. You talk about white privilege. I've got department privilege. I'm privileged. We have revenue, we have training, we have equipment, we have all the things that you need, but most importantly, I have the greatest staff of good human beings. And I challenge anyone who's in any interactions with them to say anything different. I just don't hear it. So I know I'm getting preachy here. These are emotional times. It's hard. It's hard for these officers. We all go home and we watch these actions. We got to explain them to our family, to our friends. I know I have to have trust in the community, but my 13-year-old son watched that video, started asking me questions, hard conversations. I dedicate my life to this job. I'm not home now. So my kids need to know that I do a good thing, and that brought disservice upon me as a person. I've never seen my kid question what I do for work. Those things can't be lost either. There's a human side to this, and it bothers us as police officers. It bothers us people first, what's going on, and the distrust they feel, but we're passionate about this work, and it hurts us. Everyone says it's the cliche, no one hates a bad cop worse than a good cop. It's true. It's true. I haven't been home in a week because of some actions of a criminal act by an officer wearing the same uniform. But it started some good conversations. I hope there's some benefit out of it. I hope we're going to have some conversations. We had a great rally. It was a unifying thing. It was a very powerful moment on this weekend. We're having this good conversation today. I hope to have more of these conversations. If someone from the community wants to talk to me about my policy, my door is open. I can't put a Zoom camera in here as I craft every single one of them, but I'll take anybody's input. Well, believe me, they're actually kind of dry for the most part. There's some that are exciting. So I hate to preach, but I just want people to know where we're coming from, and that we hear that there's some problems, and I'm trying to find those problems to fix. But I can't fix problems unless people tell me what they are. And then I will do my damnedest to fix those problems. I will stay here day and night. And Matt can tell you, I've been here day and night, and I will remain here day and night until this trust is replaced. That's what I've been tasked with, but it's bigger than the police job. So.
Thank you, Chief. The next participant will be Stephanie Austin. Stephanie, it'll take me a moment to unmute you here, and you should be good to go, hopefully here shortly. Oops. There you go. Your microphone is live. Thank you for your patience, Stephanie.
Sure, thank you. So I'm new to Keep Elizabeth in Maine, so forgive me if there's an obvious answer to this question, but I'm just curious if like arrest records, summons, moving violations, interactions by the police with the public, or is that public data broken down with like demographic information?
It depends how you want to break that down. A lot of the information, everything falls under a FOIA request. I'm sure, once again, I'm going to defer to Jonathan. He's much better at untangling some of those issues, but it's freedom of information request. We can give general data on arrest, complaints. Those are all gathered by the state. They're gathered by us as a department. And with all of this too, another interesting thing that's going on with our department specifically is we are getting into a new records management program with the Portland Police Department, who does all our dispatching, as well as South Portland. So we're in a program with them, and we're in a very long project that's starting. So there's numerous projects here of change that it's a records management system, which is going to give us a lot more ability to provide information for citizens. The system we have right now, I'll admit, difficult, quite antiquated, even sometimes in asking, basic requests by the media, how many of these incidents have you had? It's very tough to pull that information out. It's an antiquated system. There's a bunch of different matrix we're going to be able to draw out of this new system that's going to be going online by January. And I'm very excited about the opportunities it's going to have to just add more transparency. But a lot of the specific information pertaining to criminal acts, we can give some general information, but I'll fall under a FOIA request, and I'll let Jonathan speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, non-conviction data, there are limitations on what can be provided. Obviously, people's identities can't be made public if there's no criminal conviction or arrest or anything like that. Similar to the situation that the chief's dealing with an antiquated system that the DA's offices across the state have been dealing with, a system that we're in the midst of replacing now, which hopefully we'll be able to pull that data a lot easier from the system that we have now. The district attorneys got together in the, I believe it was the spring or summer of 2019, and agreed to provide all of our data, including information like you were just asking for, age, race, gender, when it came to interactions that they had with our office. And that information was submitted to a group called the Council of State Governments, which was putting together adjustment for, Justice Reinvestment in Maine report that was provided late last year, 2019. Unfortunately, they didn't provide they didn't do an analysis of the information that the DA's office had provided. So we're in the midst of trying to get that data analyzed. Because you can have all the data that you want. What you need is somebody to actually study it, to break it down, and to show you what it really means. And so we're in the midst of using that data that we pulled that didn't get used by this research group that was coming from out of state to do this very large report. And they did a great report, most from the information that was provided by the Department of Corrections and the judicial branch. But yeah, that information will hopefully get analyzed. But that too is information that contains, we can't just put it out in the press, because it actually contains information that is identifying to individuals, which it's not broken down by conviction or non-conviction data. And a lot of it would have to be redacted. So it's something that we want to know what this data means and what we can look more into to learn more, because that's the key. I mean, as the chief said numerous times, as I said, we can always do better, and that's the goal of what we do on an everyday basis, either from the police perspective or from the prosecutor's perspective as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. There are 9 remaining questioners. If we could, we're happy to go through those 9 last questioners and then wrap things up if everyone's comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. Next, we have Senator Rebecca Millett. And Senator, if you, it's going to take me a moment to unmute you here, but hopefully I can do this successfully. Yes, your microphone is now live. Thank you and welcome.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I'll try to be quick. I've been listening to an awful lot of really great things and a lot of thoughts going through my head. But first, I just want to thank all of you for putting this together, for sticking with it, for listening to everybody. And just want to offer my partnership in whatever work that needs to happen going forward, because you know, clearly this isn't just a Cape Elizabeth issue. This isn't a Cape Elizabeth Police Department issue. That's a state issue. It's a national issue. And would love to be a part of whatever processes that you have going forward. I want to weigh in for my, my perspective on getting input from the community. I think that that will really go a long way for folks feeling like they have ownership for what is transpiring here in our town. And so if there's a way to perhaps allow for the public to weigh in on those changes that you're perhaps thinking about, Chief, and walking them through some of this, because I'm pretty sure that while you could recount them word for word, page by page, this is all new for a lot of us. And the more we understand, I think the more we can stand in partnership with you. I want to personally support the idea of restorative justice. When I was on the school board here in Cape Elizabeth, this was something that we talked about. And I will be frank that it encountered some resistance from our educators, but that was a long time ago. I think we've learned a lot. I think we have some really great examples in our nearby communities, like South Portland in particular, and would love to see you, Chief, and you, District Attorney Sahrbeck, to perhaps provide some leadership on that, you know, not just at the town level, but also within our schools, as a really powerful way of keeping our kids out of the criminal justice system. And I just want to recognize that, yes, the school resource officers clearly have a role, but as somebody who chairs the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee within the state legislature, we are hearing a lot about educators confronting a lot of trauma from our children, a lot of mental health issues and a lot of behavioral issues. And I'm pretty sure that as great guys that your officers are, they probably don't have the very specific training and education that's required to be able to deal with the multifaceted problems that are being presented. And so I'm going to use my platform to advocate for funding for counselors and folks that can actually meet these kiddos where their problems lie before actually needing to encounter any sort of officer. And then lastly, thank you so much for giving me this time. You know, when people say our system is broken, we're not just talking about law enforcement. I think a lot of us are recognizing that we are facing broken systems in healthcare, living wages, poverty, mental health services, etc. And if we can all partner in trying to address those, we can probably go a long way in minimizing the kind of negative encounters that those can cause with law enforcement. So those are my thoughts for the evening. Again, just thank you all so much for giving us your time this evening and giving us a lot more of the time than you probably anticipated. And again, please reach out. I'd love to be a partner with all of you.
Just to speak to one of those moments, and thank you, Rebecca, for jumping in here and giving us your input and your insight. I do want to remind people, though, that because it is a big question across the country, and I was actually at a forum with Frank Clark just a few months ago before COVID hit at USM, and also with the SRO from South Portland. I was just there as just to be supportive of Frank and to kind of hear what the discussions were, because I do want to hear the needs of the community. So outside of, you know, I'm still going to meetings at USM, and they hosted a forum talking about the removal of school resource officers, and it is a big push across the country, and that's why I made sure, you know, to reach out to different people and get their input. And once again, I will say, in my tenure here, in Dave's 2 years, not a single negative thing I've heard, but more importantly, Dave's paid for my budget. I am not detracting from any counselors, any other budgetary needs of the school department. That is funded 100% through the police department. I think that's a good use, a utilization of the funds, the budget of the police department. I think as far as dollar return, I always say Dave gives me my best dollar return, to be honest with you. The impact that he has, the connections he creates, that's great. And I will also say too, though, that our officers are very well trained with mental health advocacy. As some of these systems have broken down, as some of the funding has broken down, as different politicians have made their way through and gutted different programs, we end up oftentimes being the de facto mental health worker. And we are, CIT trained, verbal judo trained. We are the experts on a lot of topics. We absolutely, therapeutically trained, no, but I think officers here deal very effectively. And to be honest with you, those are some of the most increased calls we've had. They're some of the most violent, chaotic calls that we have. And they're going up right now in terms of, I know we're talking a lot about what's happened recently with police race relations, but COVID has increased those numbers. A lot of people who are in crisis or battling substance abuse are relapsing. We've had some overdoses. We've had some people fall into crisis over this. It's impacted the whole community. Our calls for service have gone up overall. Some of it's as simple as you're home all day and you don't realize your dog goes to the bathroom in your yard, but now you're staring out the window all day so you see it. But our calls for service have gone up and in a lot of different ways. But I'm proud of the way our officers handle mental health calls and just want to make sure I added that in there. But once again, Dave is paid for by me.
One thing I just want to say real quick, Senator Millett, I appreciate you being on and offering your comments. I wholeheartedly agree that we got to do this together, and appreciate you offering your services. And let me just say, I'm offering mine as well. Back in February, I had a great conversation with the principal and the vice principal at Cape High about restorative justice and talking about adverse childhood experiences, and both of them were very welcoming about the conversation and moving forward with those ideas. And it's something that I've been speaking to superintendents about. I had a great conversation with the Cape Elizabeth Educational Foundation about it as well. So if you ever need somebody who you're looking to advocate for this, feel free to reach out, because it's something that in the long run, if we can address this at the educational level as middle school or high school, those hopefully will be individuals that never come and step foot into the criminal justice system. But unfortunately, as we've seen with the school to prison pipeline, unfortunately, that's sometimes where the issues can begin.
And I think this also reminded me of something else. I think, we're very fortunate right now that, in going back to Officer Dave, he helped develop that relationship between me and school administration. I have a very open level of communication with them. Saturday was the one morning I was home. This weekend, I was home for a few hours and I spent the majority of the time on the phone with the principal and the vice principal. We get together, we talk about challenges that we're faced. I don't think that happens in a lot of communities. We're fortunate through my relationship with Dave. Also, do I know necessarily independently of Dave that this wouldn't happen, but he does help me. I'm down there a lot. I'm at the schools a lot. I think it's important that we are all rowing in the same direction, and that be the lawmakers, that be the district attorney's office, that be the educators, that be us. We're all in a boat together. If we're rowing in different directions, we're going nowhere. But at this point, I'm very fortunate to have a great relationship with Jonathan. He's out here all the time. We have professional conversations, we have community conversations, we have personal conversations. You need those personal relationships and those relationships of trust. I trust Jonathan Sahrbeck 100%. He's the huge advocate for us. He's a great sounding board. You need that. And we need that with everybody right now. We need everyone to get together. Everyone's upset. Everyone's angry. Let's use this anger. Let's use this frustration. I'm angry. I'll admit it. I'm angry. I'm mad about this. I'm really mad about this. Let's use this anger to get some progress, to start some conversations. So we're not doing this again like we've done so many times and just get mad and then it goes away and then we get mad. I want to get some fixing out of this. If this is horrible for everyone, let's get some benefit out of it. And we really started, I thought, the other day, and things like this are just going to keep improving things.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Jonathan. Next, we have Joanna Payne. Joanna, it'll take me a moment here to get you get your microphone. There we go. You should be live now. Thank you for your patience.
Actually, this is Joanna's husband. I guess the computer is misidentifying me. I'm Reed Dyer.
Sorry, Reed.
No problem. So thank you for the time. And, you know, a lot of this conversation has been about specific things that Chief Fenton and the police department can do to address a lot of issues. I want to just one quick comment. I mean, I think early on you talked about both de-escalation training and anti-bias training. And I think those are very specific things, right, that departments can do and need to do across the nation. So it's great that the police department here is already ahead of the curve. But I think part of the frustration has been like, well, what else is there to be done, right? And you know, you talked about not being broken. The problem is bigger than the police, and I agree. So one of the big conversations that's happened just in the last week nationally is this idea of defunding the police, right? Which I see as not a we don't need police, but as a community's call for saying with limited resources, how are we using them? And so just sort of to that fact, what I'd love to hear from you, just for some context, is kind of how the Cape Elizabeth Police Department, both your budget and your size in terms of number of officers, sort of compares to similarly sized communities in Maine, to give us some context of how money is being spent. You know, and not just maybe, you know, Falmouth and Cumberland and Yarmouth, which obviously socioeconomically are very similar to us, but other communities that might be sort of similarly sized. That would help, I think, people to understand, hey, is the money that we're spending on this better than sort of what the opportunity cost could be if it were redirected to social services or health or school systems. So I'd love some context from you so we can understand the value that we're getting from your department.
Reed, I'd be happy to provide you some of that information as well. Just based on the last benchmark study that I've had able to reference in the past, Cape Elizabeth is generally, as far as per capita as well as percent to budget, we are among you know, looking at towns such as Freeport and looking at, let's see, surrounding communities like Scarborough, Portland, South Portland, Gorham, Freeport, Falmouth, Wyndham, Saco, Biddeford, Old Orchard Beach, and Westbrook. The town we generally rate at the, if not the least expensive. Like back the last benchmarking study that was performed in Cumberland County, at least, the per capita expense for Cape Elizabeth was 140, which was the second lowest of all those communities. The next lowest would be Wyndham, and then as far as percent of expense, Cape Elizabeth has been the lowest amount as percent of expense of the overall municipal budget, or town budget. This year, for instance, the town, our school budget is looking at, I'm just trying to get this spreadsheet out of the way. Our town budget, the police department is roughly 3.3% of the overall budget. So if that shows you the impact that it may have. And oftentimes, you know, when you watch the different news shows and you hear about different larger municipalities, cities, and towns, oftentimes, you know, you hear about large cities where they're 40% of the budget, or a significant portion of the budget. In Cape Elizabeth, like many communities, the primary driver of the budget percentage is education. For instance, this year it's roughly 75% of the overall budget, which, you know, no surprise, it's you know, this town and many towns take a great and a high amount of pride in supporting education. But as far as dollars per expended in support of the department, as well as in size, I think the numbers show that we are one of, if not the least expensive for all of the surrounding communities. Other towns in Cumberland County may not even have police departments. They may contract with Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. I live up in Gray. That's what we do up there. We spend roughly about a third of the cost, but we have 40 hours of coverage a week. And that is in a town of almost the same exact size. And I'll just say in the summertime, it's a heck of a challenge when the town almost doubles in size due to the lakefront population that shows up there. So, but if you look at other communities that do actually have police departments, our numbers are always and have been historically at the lower end of it. And part of me says, I mean, you know, as a professional manager and a person who's been in government for 26 years, I look at that and say, wow. And I look at the caliber and the cut of the people who we have working here and the results that we get from them. And the fact that the town has always supported the police department, and the councils have consistently supported the police department and have placed public safety and the health, safety, and welfare of the community above all else. And the fact that it's done so cost effectively, while also meeting the desire to promote education, is really a badge of honor for the community. So I hope that was helpful and answers your question. And let's see, next we'll have Valerie Levanos. And Valerie, I'll get your microphone live here. There you go. Your microphone is live. Thank you for checking in and your patience.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Chief Fenton, a few minutes ago, or a while ago now, you said that if there were problems in Cape, that you want to address the problems. And I was wondering if you think that there's a problem with racism in Cape, and as a community leader, how you would address that.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I was going into this event on Sunday, and I was able to hear some firsthand experience. That's what we needed. That's why I was willing to, you know, with the challenges of COVID, to go down and have that gathering. And we did it the best way we could, but it was an opportunity to hear that there was some experiences with race. I think it intentionally, you know, there was the events of a police department that brought this forth, but I think it realized quickly what it is everywhere. This is a community issue. Racism in the ranks of a police department it cannot happen. You must eradicate it immediately because of the powers that we have, the authority we have over people, and how that can be misguided and misused and abusive. But I think at the core of it, we have a racism problem in our community. We have a racism problem as a country, and I think that's what we really need to delve into the mix of. And that's what I heard on Sunday. I heard that there were people who grew up here. I think it was an eye opener for some people in Cape. And like I said, I keep talking about Aman, but when we're having relations or a fracture, I'm going to talk to a person of color, a young man who's mobilized for this action, and take his input. I want to go get the information. He even said to me, Chief, I mean, Aman and I have probably spoken. He's got my cell phone. I think we've had like 7 separate conversations this week. And he said, I'm glad you're calling me, because I don't want someone of white privilege to be answering these questions that you're having. So, and to hear him, he wasn't going to speak on Sunday. He wanted to just do his rally, which is going to happen tomorrow night, where he's going to march on the police department. I was integral, and he will tell you that. He didn't want to partake. The organizers, I think Jonathan was on that. There was questions of whether or not he was going to speak. And I encouraged him to be there. I thought he had such a great voice, a charisma, and an experience. People need to hear, you know, racism, like a lot of things. And I feel like sometimes I'm doing it with the ranks. That's a problem here. That's a problem away. And I think what we experienced on Sunday was some firsthand knowledge of numerous people of color who have grown up in the community of Cape Elizabeth and experienced some really upsetting things. And I think it made people reevaluate things and to stop, you know, starting with us as individuals, and then start to work out. And oftentimes it's the span of control. And, you know, for me at home as a dad, that's my kids. For me at the department, that's my officers. I think us as a community, this is a community issue. As the police department goes, the community, we're reflective of both. If there's issues in the ranks of police departments, there's issues in the community. They're not unique to us. I think sometimes it's easy to just say, oh, police are terrible and they're racist, but you know, we have to combat racism everywhere. We definitely need to root it out of police work. It should have the scrutiny that it does. We should have scrutiny by the public. We cannot have it amongst my ranks. I will not have it amongst my ranks, but we also shouldn't have it in the community. You shouldn't have it with kids' experience in schools. I think we need some racial sensitivity classes in the school system. I think we can make changes everywhere. I think the school's looking at that and talking about that. That's what this tragedy needs to do. We've got to find something positive out of this. And it started by a dialogue on Sunday. Let's see what we do with it. And I'm trying to do what I can to make changes. I'm sure the schools, they're very receptive. I think the council had some discussions last night. I think Jonathan's looking at the justice system from his perspective. We've all got to look at our span of control and see what we can do. But in households here in Cape Elizabeth, I think we need to start looking too at how we can better.
I would just want to add too as well. I think you're being either intellectually dishonest or intellectually lazy to say that, oh, there's no racism in Cape Elizabeth, or and for that very aspect saying that there's no racism anywhere. Come on, and And even what we heard on Sunday too, it's not always malicious. It's somebody saying, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" To somebody who's a person of color. That might not be something that somebody is actually trying to actively be mean, but at the same time, that is something that is impacting a person of color profoundly. And we need to listen to people who have these lived experiences. And very importantly, I think it really starts at home. You have to have those tough conversations with your kids, with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends. If you hear somebody say something, tell them it's not cool. Tell them that it's not right. Tell them that they should stop. Tell them that they really need to think about what they're saying. Because unless we challenge ourselves and make ourselves uncomfortable and make our family and friends uncomfortable, we're not going to make we're not going to make the changes that we need to. And unfortunately, this could be all for naught. And let's not have it that way.
Thanks, gentlemen. Next participant will be Melanie Thomas. Melanie, I'll get your microphone live here. There we go. You are live. Thank you for your patience and welcome.
Hi, thank you all. I was at the Unity rally. I spoke with me and my kiddos. We have been here for about 7 years. And Jonathan, I apologize for not saying hi to you or acknowledging you. That was no disrespect. But I do have one question, well, two questions actually. One's for Officer Fenton and one's for Jonathan. My biggest issue is how other officers don't call out other officers when they see blatant injustices against people of color or in general. It can be things heard in the locker room, in a patrol car, on duty, but most importantly on duty, of course. Where's the training or oath on that they should call their fellow officers out? It really is unacceptable. And how are we stopping that? To me, I think it starts with all of the chiefs to kind of, like you said, you're a family, you know your officers, and you know what they feel, how they think. I think it's really about them calling each other out. But I want your feedback on that. And my other question is for you, Jonathan. The justice system fails people of color as well. How do people of color get a fair trial when the people judging us are not our peers, and they already have biases, privilege, and conditioning against us? Those are my questions.
I can start. These are, like I said, I wish I had a simple answer for it. I can tell you it starts with me. It starts with the culture I create for the department. It starts with the ideals that I foster here. But I think too, our officers, it's pride in your department and how you carry yourself. Anything that is substandard, we are not okay with. I am not okay with, and I push that down to my officers, and I remind that to them every day. You know, officers here need to be proud of their department and the way they carry themselves, but at the core, they need to be good people, and we need to have little patience for discrimination, for any of those things. And that's a really big human factor. Those are things that I don't want, how do you put it? Policies shouldn't drive those things. That's humans, you know, that's humans being humans. That shouldn't, for police officers, it shouldn't be any different than everybody else, which is just looking at someone and saying, this is unacceptable. Here too, it should be rooted out and brought to my attention. In things you address. We need sensitivity training, and we need to continually do those things to reinforce. But at the core of it, it's about the people. It's about the attitudes. It's about the behavior. But I think the officers here would call one another out. I think they take a lot of pride in their job. They spend a lot of time here. We're very dedicated. We're very loyal. At the end of the day, too, we have a very educated staff here. There's a host of things. But at the end of the day, it's about people. I really keep coming back to about the people we have here. And people in general need to call each other out. We need to do it at the police department. We need to do it as a community. And we need to reflect the community. The community we need to call out culture. We need it in the community. We need it in the police department as well. We need to route this out and let people know this isn't okay. And I think officers too, we're feeling the impact of other officers right now. You know, my officers are feeling it. I'm feeling it. This is hurt. This is, you know, I don't like this. We don't like the way this is reflected on all of us. And I think that this is a huge national scale. I think officers feel the same way on a local level. You know, we've taken a big hit and we deserve it, and we own it. But that's what routes it out, is the pride that we have in our job and knowing how much disservice is brand process of lack of trust we now have, and we need to build that back up. And officers we're digging out of a hole right now. Our reservoir, as I said, has been drained, and I need my officers to keep filling it back up.
Melanie, you did a fantastic job on Sunday speaking, so I just want to say thank you for offering what you said. Yeah, it's a great question on what we're doing to protect people within the criminal justice system, because I take my job as a prosecutor. I know all the ADAs in Cumberland County do the same, is because we have a significant amount of power when it comes to what we do. We have the authority over somebody's liberty, and that's an ultimate control to have. And you really need to respect that and make sure that what we're doing is always in the interest of justice. And when I say in the interest of justice, I mean what's fair and what's right. So because of that, one of the big things that when I became DA was we had an implicit bias training. And I say that because it's important to have people understand what implicit bias is, that basically everybody has preconceived notions about what they think about a certain group of people. And because as prosecutors and police in a sense too, we have the authority, because of the authority that we have, that we can wield, we can do harm to individuals if we don't take that into account. It's a very important thing to think about, and it's a very important thing to address, which is why we need to make sure that we do that as prosecutors, so that we know that we are fair, treating everybody equally within the criminal justice system. Another thing that we always make sure that we're doing is we don't have the authority over the police officers on a everyday scale, but if we see something within a criminal report or a police report, or something that is said, or something that we believe isn't, like I said, isn't what's fair, isn't what's right, isn't in the interest of justice, then we can take that step and we can dismiss that case, and we can report to a police chief about what we've seen. Thankfully, over the last 18 months or so, I've never had to make that call to a police chief about a certain officer that I thought was acting inappropriately, or had pulled somebody over, or stopped somebody solely based upon their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, anything like that. But it's something that we take very seriously as prosecutors. We don't get paid extra for cases that go all the way to trial, or that we dispose of cases. That's not, we have the power to dismiss a case by signing it. And it's almost a power that makes us more powerful than a judge in a courtroom, because we have that ultimate ability to basically prosecute somebody or dismiss somebody. So it's knowing that and taking action on it, and really making sure that all of us are doing the right thing. And like I said, the right thing to me is doing what's fair, doing what's just for everybody that steps foot in the criminal justice system. And one of the big things that was brought up earlier, if we can come up with a solution within the criminal justice system that's going to result in that person never coming back into the criminal justice system, then we've done our job very well. I kind of joke, but in all seriousness, I would love for this to happen. I would be the first person that would advocate to put myself out of business, because that would mean that nobody's coming into the criminal justice system. And that's very important to me, in trying to make sure that we steer people in the right direction, that they don't have encounters with law enforcement, that they don't have encounters with the court system. But if people see things, if they have concerns, then just like Chief Fenton, I'm all ears. Please contact me and let me know, and we can talk about what suggestions or what concerns or what questions people might have, because I need to know these things.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have 4 questions left, and I think for the benefit of time, we're closing in on 2 hours. So if we could, we can go through the last 4. We have Audra Gore, Tim Thompson, Jana Zimmerman, and I have a 603 number that will be coming up after Ms. Gore. So Audra, hold on just a moment. We'll get your microphone live here, and you should be good to go. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. The thing that I am enjoying about this evening is that I'm hearing our community, and I really appreciate all of you listening. And something you mentioned, Chief Fenton, is that the racism is a community problem. And I believe that our community is your untapped resource. And I hope you hear us asking to make us a part of this. I hope that you'll utilize us, that we're on the center of the bulletin board when you're moving the pieces around and thinking about what this looks like going forward. And on the other side of it, something you can do for us is to be a strong voice, meaning when I drive through our town, I can barely see the Black Lives Matter in our town. And that's something, why can't there be a racism is not tolerated here out front of the police station? Is that a statement we could get behind? I say yes. What is it that we can do? We're talking about, training and being able to handle mental illness and de-escalation and youth in trouble and trauma and tactics. I'm happy that there's that training in place, but this isn't just about taking care of those problem moments or talking about Black Lives Matter and starting with this list of problems. This is, I think, part of our problem, which is why we're being able to talk about this as a community. So please use us. We're here. When you're thinking about making the policies, please include us. And what is it that we could do as a community? What could you do to help lead us as a community in expressing better that our town is absolutely 100% against racism? In fact, we're anti-racist.
I hope on some level that was the step I started on Sunday. There was a challenge there. There's a certain segment of the community thought it was irresponsible on my part to be part of that in light of the COVID situation, but I had to make a choice. And my job is to make those tough choices. And it wasn't that tough of a choice for me. I thought this needs to happen now. I need to be there as a leadership role within this community to stand there and to stand next to Jonathan. We said Black Lives Matter, and to know that that's the foundation. I needed people to hear that. I know I've gotten some emails and some people are upset with me for being part of what they viewed as a violation. But there's been a lot of violations for certain segments of our community that we needed to address that day. And the timing was there, and I made a choice, and I was there, and I'm going to continue to be there, and I continue to be open to members of the community. I need people to come talk to me. I need people to know me. I need people to trust me. We need to get together with the community and align the goals together. And everyone says, it's very specific. Race, we're going to talk about policy, we're going to talk about procedure, we're going to talk about training. It's about connection. I need to be in the community. When the community knows me and trusts me, then I can have influence. Then I can direct my troops to do what we need as a community. But I need the engagement. And I can't go door to door. If you want me to, I'll try. But my door is always open, and I need people to come in here and say, hey, Chief Fenton, I got some questions about a policy. I'll grab it and pull it out. And I have a list of them here. I have my situational use of force. I have my hate crimes bias. I have my response to mental illness. I have my riots and unlawful assemblies. I've got everything. Come see me. I would love input. I want the crafting of the community, the venue to do it. If there's a better venue where people want some more transparency with how we run this department, this is the framework. I've really undertaken a large project in redoing them. A lot of these haven't been redone in 10 years. I'm trying to redo all of them, in addition to the regular police functions we're doing. I hope to do more.
In addition to that, Chief, back in June of 2017, the council adopted a resolution that was brought forward by the Cape Elizabeth Diversity Coalition that was passed by the council. And I think, it's an extension of trying to find a way that Cape has always, I think, been a leader as far as trying to promote diversity as they can and be supportive of the issues. But we're in a different chapter now, and the conversation obviously is advancing. So I think having this event this evening is, I don't know, to me, I look at it as a very powerful moment for the community to say, how can we make a change and how can we be part of that change? And I think, in many ways it started started the ball rolling back in 2017 with the council passing that and moving that forward. And I think we just need to advance the dialogue today. And looking at the number of folks we've had come out this evening, as well as hearing your input, and having Jonathan providing his input from the district attorney's side is really moving, is helping us move forward. Obviously, there's no finish line. There really isn't. It's a question of trying to keep the ball advancing, and for lack of sports, I'm afraid that metaphor may not be accurate today, but we do need to keep moving the dialogue forward and healing and recovering and improving as a community and as a nation as a whole. So if you don't mind, I'll go on to our next speaker. And I apologize, I do not have a name here. This is a 603-727-6857 number. So yeah, I think your microphone is now live, and if you'd please just introduce yourself, we would be forever grateful.
Yeah, hi, this is Sean Fitzgerald and Kayak Gardner, just calling in.
Thank you, Sean.
Just wanted to say first, Black Lives Matter. I don't think that can be said enough. I kind of had two questions here. One was actually for Jonathan. Jonathan, there was an article last Wednesday in the Bangor Daily News talking about the lack of tracking of racial data. And I think specifically you were actually quoted in it regarding Cumberland County and how it doesn't track racial data. And, what does that look like for the future? And then the second question actually is for Chief Fenton. Chief, I think you just mentioned it's right there on your desk. Can you actually let us know what is the procedure if an officer is accused of discrimination or racial profiling? Do they get suspended? How does that exactly work? Thank you.
So I had mentioned this earlier, but I can definitely go a little bit more in depth. The data that we had, I think going back 5 years, was offered up to a group called the Council of State Governments that was going to do a report on the justice reinvestment in Maine. That they had information from the Department of Corrections along with the judicial branch with regards to some of that information that had come into the criminal justice system. All 8 district attorneys and the Attorney General agreed to also give our data from the different districts, which is all the counties across Maine, to be part of this report. I can't tell you why, because it's kind of frustrating to me, but our data was not included in this report when it was submitted to the legislature at the end of last year. And because of that, the district attorneys are going to try to get all of that data analyzed to make sure that we can get that, to see what it all means and to get those answers. Because data is a great thing to have, but if you don't have somebody who's actually examining it, looking at it and teaching you what it means, then it's a lot of numbers. So we need to know a little bit more. Also, the DAs are going into a new data system that is going to be hopefully in place by the end of this year. I think Androscoggin County, which is District 3, is going to be the first group or the first office that's going to get this going. And that is going to make, hopefully, the tracking of these types of data points a lot easier, because the system that we're using right now, it's very difficult to pull that data out and really kind of look at it usefully. So hopefully in the future we will be having that, but in the meantime, we're still trying to get the data from the last, I think, 5 years is what we submitted to this research group looked at, and we're going outside of the research group that did not analyze what we had provided them. So we're going to try to get that done somewhere else. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, in terms, and by the way, I recognize your phone number because we spoke earlier this week. I probably could have said who it was for Matt there. I immediately recognized it. But so for us, one of our policies says here, and I can read it directly, it is also the policy of this agency that bias-based profiling and/or any discriminatory practices by members of this agency is strictly prohibited. This includes stops, detentions, arrests, seizures, forfeitures, efforts based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, economic status, age, or cultural groups. Requires that individuals shall only be stopped or detained when legal authority exists, and not to do so that members of this agency must base their information and actions solely on an individual's conduct or behavior for specific suspect information. So a violation, that would be a clear violation that would be put through our internal affairs investigation here, and then it would be sought out for discipline, depending on where that fell in there. But it would definitely be, as you know, and I hope people know, and I need people to trust, I can't have that in my department. I can't have that in my agency. I would be looking for the strictest forms of punishment that I could do. This is where I can start turning in people's certification to be an officer in the state of Maine. You can go to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. Officers can be decertified for specific types of conduct. I would be, depending on the conduct, be looking at any type of hate bias crimes. We do refer cases to the district attorney's office. This is one that's going to get the full attention of this chief. Its actions and any violation of those things that, once again, officers have misconduct, but it's something like that that's going to absolutely rout the foundation of trust that we have within the community. So the full weight of my discipline would be falling down on that for sure.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next we'll have Jana Zimmerman, and then Tim Thompson will conclude our evening. So Jana, I'm making your mic live now. You should be there. Your microphone is now on. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you for taking my questions, and I appreciate y'all's staying so late tonight. I know it's difficult. You probably had a long day. And I think you've addressed a lot of my questions. I'm a parent of a Black child, and I have to tell you, I have anxiety every single day. And I'm a white parent, so I can't even imagine how Black parents feel, because they don't have the privilege I have, and so they face a really exponential issues, I would think. And I'm just guessing. And the first call I got after the tragedy happened was from my daughter asking when was the last time we told our son how to deal with police, how to stay alive, So I'd kind of like y'all to tell me, do I have to really worry about that? Because, you're supposed to put your hands where they can be seen. I'd like to be able to tell him the same things I'd tell a 16-year-old white son. That's what I'd like. And I want to live in a world where a 16-year-old white son gets the same instructions of how to be polite, how to do the things the officer needs you to do to show your license and all that things, but, that he doesn't have extra worries. So from what y'all told me tonight, it sounds like I don't have this problems per se in, the immediate area. But what is your advice to parents like me to keep their children alive?
That's a tough question to unwrap. The very fact that you feel in that segment of the community, and it's real, I'm hearing it everywhere, that an officer pulling you over, that means we've done something very wrong. That alone speaks volumes of where we are as policing in America today. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for me to think that when someone sees me in public or sees me in my uniform, that's not immediately going to be a position of trust. It would be that I would invoke fear rather than, oh God, oh good, the police are here. That's what I'm supposed to hear. And through the actions of officers across the country, that's not the case anymore. So these are complex issues. I honestly think, I got to admit, when I don't have the answer, I don't have the answer for this one. It breaks my heart that you're asking it. I'm overwhelmed by the fact that you're asking it. I had an individual in my office this week who looked at me and said, I'm scared when I'm stopped in Cape Elizabeth. It broke my heart. That to my core. In Cape, you feel scared? Yeah, I feel that way. I said, have we done anything? And he said, no, it's just the way things are today. And I honestly, I wish I could craft some articulate, great way to tell you things are going to be better, but this is a societal issue. This is a police issue. This is a trust issue. It shouldn't be like that. And I wish I had an answer. If I come up with one, I'll promise Mrs. Zimmerman to give you a contact immediately. But I think I think it just shows how broken we are at this point, and that nothing else proves that we are broken, that there is a problem. I know there's a problem, we've known. It's just a matter of trying to regroup that trust, and you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't have to have those conversations.
Yeah, I would just offer that unfortunately we're not at that point. And if we were, we probably wouldn't all be having this conversation tonight. So you definitely, to hear those statements made at on Sunday, and then at the other Black Lives Matter rally that I attended, I can understand the trauma. I can understand, not to say that I can understand it because I've lived it, which I definitely am not. I'm very privileged. But to really have that, to hear people say that they have to teach their kids to act a certain way, and it's not just out of respect, it's not just it's out of fear, and it's out of their worry that something awful is going to happen to them. It's a terrible state that we're in this country, but we have to acknowledge that we're here right now. And what's mind-boggling to me is that I was at Cape Elizabeth Middle School back in the early 90s when the videotape of Rodney King being beaten and the LA riots followed up. And here I am, I'm about to be 41 years old, and we're still, the same conversation is happening again. When is enough enough? When is it that we're all actually going to do something about this, so we're not having this same conversation when my son is my age at this point? It's something that we're not there yet, and we really have to dig ourselves out of this this hole to really work together to get there. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have this terrible conversation, and it's going to be after another tragedy. And like I said before, we just can't go there. We can't have that happen again.
I think, now that I think a little bit, and it doesn't apply to your question directly, but it's something I'm always echoing to my officers here. And it's a reason why I still go up to the academy and teach defensive tactics. Like I said, I'm the only chief, I think, in the state that still takes time to go up and do that. And even as busy as I was this past week, on Monday, or last Monday, that's where I was. And one of the things I'm always, as the older, wiser officer now, teaching, I'm always telling my officers, and I'm telling young officers, and I get the opportunity to meet with and influence through my teaching every single officer in the state of Maine, every state trooper, sheriff, warden, police officer from municipal department. And I say, we have a unique opportunity in this career, and you've got to seize it, to have an impact on people's lives every single day. Every interaction you have, you're going to have thousands and thousands of them. Those people you're interacting with are going to remember that exact moment, and they're going to judge us all on that moment. It's huge. It's an honor to be able to do it, and don't dishonor the rest of us with your behavior. And I reiterate that to them, and make sure that they see and passion how much this opportunity to impact people's lives in a very positive way. You're at some people's lives at very terrible times, and how you treat individuals is how they're going to judge our profession forever. And we're broken on a lot of levels. I know I coach baseball for all my kids' teams, and I make a conscious effort over the last 5 or 6 years to coach half the season, and then halfway through I show up in uniform with a cruiser, and all the kids universally go, "You don't seem like a cop, you're a cop." And I always think, well, we've got something wrong that we have that reaction, because usually as a coach, I'm not a very big disciplinarian. I'm kind of a fun guy, goofy guy, but it's something wrong with policing that kids don't that they're shocked by that. Dave Galvin offers me an opportunity to make a better impression. My kids have a very unique impression from seeing me and my friends, but too, they see the media and look at me with questions. That's from those difficult emotional conversations. We're crafting narratives for people, and I think that's where we're broken. We're broken on a bigger level. We're broken in terms of race and just trust. But we're given such wide powers that the abuse of them is going to be and should be across the media. They need to be shouted from the rooftops when we mess up, because we got to fix them, because it impacts everyone, the communities and the trust, because the police are the community are the police. So.
Thanks, gentlemen. Mr. Thompson, I am making your microphone live here, and hopefully I can get this done successfully.
Still muted.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you, Tim, for your patience. I appreciate it.
Here, Nancy had to help me with that. Listen, there's so many things that this has been so good. Looking at this screen with the 4 people on this screen, it makes me feel good about the team that we have here at Cape. This is something that's very broke, and knowing that the 3 of you, including Matt, are working at it. I know John for a long, long time, and I know his passion for building trust, and trust is where it's all about. We can do amazing things if we all can build trust. I've seen the chief from the time he started as a patrolman, sergeant, detective, so well prepared for the position he is in today. He's gone to the academy. Even Rachel here, who sat here so patiently with her cat all night long, 30 years at the library, and now she's our library director. I mean, that's the way we do things in Cape. Matt worked in town for a long, long time with Mike McGovern, mentoring and developing his skills, and to look at all you guys and where you've come from, and Rachel, and how well prepared you are. We've got a big problem in front of us. We got to build trust in our community. The lady earlier talked about the community is a big part of this. Use us. Nancy and I have done some things with the schools through a mental health initiative, and the school is so appreciative of having our resource officer in there. I remember talking to Principal Shedd. He feels like he's part of his staff. I know he's part of your staff, Chief, but the principals feel like he's part of their staff. He's looking for however he can contribute. They love him at the school. The kids build relationships with him at the school. They trust him. The training our officers go through is amazing. I mean, we now have some additional per diem firefighters that we put on over the last couple of years based on our need. But before that, and still even today, a police officer in this town is often on the scene first before anybody else. They're all EMTs, they're all trained. The CIT training, Nancy was very involved with the trauma intervention program, crisis intervention program. These officers all go through 5 days of crisis intervention training. These guys our police officers are well trained. They're EMTs, they're on the site, they're delivering. We personally experienced many years ago Officer Fenton in our home. When we needed, with this recent suicide we had to put together a forum pretty quickly. We got the Center for Grieving Children in here. We talked to the chief, bang, he's on the site, he's ready to be there to help out that night. John Sahrbeck, as our district attorney, was ready to be there that night, answering questions, helping people with their emotions. There's just so many positive things that have been done, are being done, can continue to be done. And I just think when you look at what our police, and I, as the chair of the comprehensive plan over the last few years, we studied a lot of other towns and what they spend. Our town is very efficiently run in every department, whether it's the police department, the library. Look at our library. It's a phenomenal resource in town. Our mill rate is as good as any town that can be comparable. Our school system is the best school system that you can find. There's so many different reasons besides our ocean and our Fort Williams that people choose to come here and live. But our town manager, our librarian, our police chief, district attorney, what we have here in town, we can tackle this problem of racism, and we can be a model for our state and for our country. And thank you guys for all that you do for our town.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
So this is the longest 1-hour session that I think I've personally ever been a part of. And I want to thank you, Chief, obviously, for your dedication. The passion that you bring to the position is, I see on a daily basis, pretty much 7 days a week these days as much as we interact, and we're all grateful for the hard work that you do. And if anybody walks away not believing that the man they see on the picture is anything other than who you say you are, then they're gravely mistaken. Jonathan, obviously we are in extremely well positioned hands with your work as our DA, and we are extremely grateful for all your hard work and the people that work for you as well as our good folks here at the police department, is who we see on a daily basis serving the community. And Rachel, thank you so much for coming up with the idea, for bringing this forward. Extremely grateful for all the work that you and the folks at the library do. And I think this may be something, at least the Zoom approach, providing outreach to the community. This has been one of the, if you can find a bright spot in a pandemic, this has been one of them. How this has been able to grow and enable the community to have discussions. And I'd like to say also to everybody who showed up tonight and came in and provided input, as well as took your time out of the start of a week when you could be doing other items. I want to thank you for your interest and your commitment and dedication to the community. It's an honor to work here, and this is my 20th year, and it's the people that make the difference here. So as we wrap up, I'd just like to say our work tonight may be over, but our service is just beginning. So I wish you all well and good health, and take good care.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Rachel. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good night.